Hey guys, it's Adam Brooks here. I'm excited to come to you today and talk to you about the 5 misconceptions of special education. Some of you know I worked as a special education teacher. I worked as an advocate. I've worked as a case manager, as a facilitator for a high school. So, special education is something that I know a lot about. I don't know everything, but I do know a lot. I'll say the first most common misconception about special education is that anyone with a diagnosis or a disability should be in special education. Now, that's not always true. Even if someone's been diagnosed, let's say, for example, with attention deficit disorder, ADD, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in special education, nor does it mean that they should be in special education. That just means they have a diagnosis, or it just means they have a disability. Even students who have physical impairments doesn't mean that they should be in special education. They only need to be in special education if their diagnosis or their disability interferes with education, if it interferes with that. So if I have ADD, but I might be able to contain it, I might have learned tools growing up to kind of get by without it, and it never interferes with my education, then you know what? It's not going to be something that I need to change their education for. My report card growing up always said, Adam can't keep his hands to himself. Adam gets up and keeps talking to his friends. It said that because I was kind of hyperactive. I was easily distracted, so I got up a lot. But it didn't interfere enough with my education to make those changes. So, that's the first misconception. The second misconception is that special education is only for kids who have intellectual disabilities. You know, the kids you typically see that you think, they must be in special education. A lot of kids in special education, in fact, 75% of all the kids in special education have a minor learning disability. Something that's just small. Something they look like me and you, but they struggle with math. They struggle with reading. They struggle with writing. That is completely common. That's completely normal. So there is a spectrum. There is a range of kids in special education. And they can be something as severe as not being able to move, being born kind of catatonic, not being able to even be, they're nonverbal, they can't speak, all the way up to kids who just struggle with reading and need to brush up and have a hard time, so they got to learn different tools to be able to read better throughout their life. So they might just be a little bit slower in these different academic areas. So that's something that's commonly misknown or unknown about special education. We think of only these kids, but really there's a range of kids that special education includes. And we'll even talk about that in a second. The third most common misconception is that special education is only for kids who are behind in instruction or behind in school. That's not the case. Special education means education that is not the median, the normal curriculum. Something that is not what everybody else is going through. So, this includes kids that are behind, but it also includes kids that are above or past the curriculum. If you've got kids who are advanced, you've got kids who are in gifted programs. Gifted programs are still part of special education, because special education just means education that's not the norm. Also, by the way, most school districts, most states, most parts of the country, we don't even use the words special education anymore. We use things like exceptional student services or exceptional students. It's just because the term special needs has been changed, and we think about it in so many different ways these days. In fact, with President Obama, he changed the term mildly or moderately mentally retarded, which is what we used to call kids, which is terrible, to now it's actually called an intellectual disability. That's why I used that earlier. So for some of you that don't know, now you know. The fourth misconception is that special education means putting kids in a separate class or a separate school or a separate building like a portable in the back. That's simply not the case. Most special education, most students who are in these programs need to be around other students. They say that students who have different needs take up about 10% of a school's population. And they have that number because if you look at our nation, about 10% of our nation's population has special needs. So when we look at that and we realize that in life we don't put them in separate workplaces. We don't put them in separate homes. We don't put them in separate places. We have them out with everybody, walking around like normal, hanging out, doing regular things. So why should school be any different? Kids need to learn and that everybody matters, that everybody deserves dignity. So incorporating kids into general ed classes is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. So if kids are in science that may struggle with science, kids who are in math who may struggle with math, that's a great thing. We shouldn't be necessarily always separating them. Now, there are some times where separating them for certain subjects might be okay. They might need that extra help, that extra learning. So it's not all bad, but for the most part, we should be incorporating these students into all of our education, all of our schools. In fact, we even need to start doing it into our athletics, into our extracurricular activities like plays, musicals, choir. These students should be involved in as many things as they can. People who don't necessarily have a disability are going to experience people with disabilities in life. So why not have that start in school? Because if we don't learn how to kind of incorporate and build each other up, then it's going to be even harder when we're adults. The last thing, number 5, misconception, is that special education only matters to parents of kids in special education. This is a lie. This is not true. We all have to take ownership in special education. We all, as a society, take ownership in what's going on. I visited with a friend from Grand Canyon who went on this amazing mission trip to Africa. He was in Kenya. And he talked about how when a child is born who needs more help, who has a disability or something, the father leaves. The dad jets because it's seen as a curse on the family. It's seen as a negative thing. America, this country, the United States, is really one of the only countries, one of the few countries who have laws that protect people with diagnoses, with disabilities. So it matters to us as a country. So it's up to us. It's for all of us to be involved in special education. It's not just for parents or for kids who have those special needs. It's not just on them. We all benefit from those people. We all benefit from learning differently. And let's be honest, none of us are normal. We all have disabilities. Some you can see and some you can't see. My disability it's not something that's on the outside. It's something that's on the inside. So we all have these struggles. We all have ways that we learn differently. So if we can kind of come together and help special education in general, throw our efforts towards kids and their learning and incorporating them into our schools and our societies, we're all going to be better off for it. We're all going to be motivated and moved because of that one thing. So I wanted to share 5 misconceptions on special education, and I hope that helped. I hope that clarified some things. I'll be back with some more stuff. So thank you guys so much.